So it's good to see you back here. And last time that we met, we spoke about on Thursday on the way the Rambam developed the concept of kavanah that we find in the Mishnah and the Tosefta, and what is really interesting and remarkable about his reworking of it. We saw that there are a number of concepts of kavanah that are working. We have one term, but it has different functions and different meanings. Sometimes it functions as a identity condition. For example, in the Mishnah in Brochis on Kriyas Shema that היה קורא בתורה והגיע זמן המקרא. Here you have one action that we can only distinguish by the manner in which the agent understands what he's doing. That's a minimalist understanding. And then we have stronger notions of kavanah. For example, as a condition for a mitzvah in Tkiyat Shofar. But we also see that there's a much stronger notion of kavanah in tefillah, where it seems that kavanah here is constitutive of the very mitzvah. And this is certainly the Rambam's position. And we mentioned the famous Reb Chaim on the Rambam in Tefillah, and also following the Rashba. Rashba has a very similar position that kavanah is constitutive of tefillah. There's no such thing as a tefillah without kavanah. Now, this leads to the possibility, which is a very interesting one, of a mitzvah as that is a material mitzvah as an occasion for kavanah, which is a very different relation between the action and the state of mind of an agent, and it seems that in Ilchot Mikvaot, the Rambam, at the end of Ilchot Mikvaot, the Rambam is moving in that direction, following the Tosefta in Rosh Hashanah, and we saw how the Rambam combines different notions of a few different sources about kavanah, about tefillah, about the uniqueness also of the concept of the lev that's working there, even though the Rambam doesn't develop it exactly. But you see how he pulls a few things together, and this is also alluded to in the Mishnah of Rosh Hashanah, where we see that the Mishnah already moves from the direction of kavanah with regard to Rosh Hashanah to the shofar towards surfacing the issue of the saraf and v'chi nachash memit v'chi nachash mechayeh and v'chi yadav shel Moshe osot milchama or shavrot milchama, and this it shows that the Mishnah is highly aware of the ability to intensify kavanah and to use a concept of kavanah to understand, I would almost say, the channel in which a person of awareness can be meets the Kodesh Baruch Hu. It's somewhere along that line, and this is interesting because it's not really developed in the Mishnah, but it seems that the Mishnah alludes to it a number of times when it thinks about the Mishnat Hasidim, And you see this in, for example, in Ein Omdin, where the Mishnah begins with this notion of Hasidim Rishonim Rishim Sha'achat Mitpalelim Kedei Sheyichavnu et Libam L'Shamayim, and I think that the halacha, if you read it this way, then the halacha afilu Hamelech Shoel Bishlomo is a halacha of Hasidim, but not an halacha of someone of a regular davener. It seems to be borne out by the last Mishnah on Chanina ben Dosa. So we already have a Mishnat Chasidim. We know that the Mishnat Chasidim is somehow connected to a very intense.
Could you like say like the shlavim, if it has any kesher, all this type of kavanah, and
I wouldn't want to say that. I wouldn't want to say such a strong position.
Just a shituf Hashem?
It's a shituf Hashem. It's I wouldn't want to say that strong. I'm just pointing to different uses in the Mishnah itself.
So could you summarize? We have how many types do we have from the beginning of the Mishnah? Do we have? How many types do we have? We have just the agent should know what's going on. How do you call it? You call it.
Look, they use one notion. The concept of kavanah is unclear in the Mishnah, but but you see that it has different uses, and I'm really moving towards the more. It's clear that
because you called it intensifying, like we're talking the same thing, and it gets more intensified. That's why.
Yes, this is the intensification has to do with the idea.
More mind.
With the idea, I would say presence.
Or presence.
How, in what sense is a person present in what they're doing? And it seems that the Mishnah opens the possibility that, certainly with regard to the Mishnat Chasidim, that there are people for whom, the materiality of an action is an occasion for kavanah, and not the other way round. That is that the and this is a big chidush if you think about it, because the Mishnah is really a book about mitzvahs, right? And it seems that the Hasidim have a different kind of relation between the kavanah and the peulah than the ordinary person for whom definitely is the focus of the halacha. This is as much as I think one can say is borne out in the Mishnah. But in order to say that, even you have to pretty much detach or understand that Ein Omdin, the fifth chapter in Brochus, understands that there's a mode of meeting the Kodesh Baruch Hu that has to do with a person's presence of mind.
Why do you call him meeting the Kodesh Baruch Hu? Because the influence of the Rambam Safech Mikvot? Because in the Mishnah you don't see it. You're talking about it kavnut la Kodesh Baruch Hu, but you call it meeting because you're mikveh, because the mikveh time.
Well, first of all, because I'm pulling it towards the Rambam's reading, so we can move from there.
Okay.
But the question is a valid question, because it has to do with what do we mean kedei sheyichavnu et libam lamakom with regard to the Hasidim.
Because focus.
No, it's not. But what is an Amidah Lifnei Hashem that means that you should be oblivious to danger?
Just like when physically when you midaf for a king, why can't you understand? When I physically go into a king, I have to imagine that when I daven.
Well, I think it's not about imagination. It could be a description of the kind. First of all, it could be a description of the intensity of a person's, let's call it for the sake of description. Okay, when the Mishnah says אפילו המלך שואל בשלומו לא ישיבנו ואפילו נחש כרוך על עקבו לא יפסיק, the Mishnah is speaking in לכאורה in normative language, but that's only one possible reading. The other possible reading is that the Mishnah is describing the degree of obliviousness of someone who is deep in the moment of meditative prayer. And I'll call it meditative not because it has because we can individuate the content, but rather because of the kind of, the word comes to me in Hebrew, shki'ah, the way you the way you're invested in what you do.
Immersed.
And if we look at it,
Immersing yourself.
yes, the kind of immersion in the. Thank you for the. Yeah, that's a good shkoyach. That it's that kind. If you read it more descriptively, then it's very powerful. And you see it. Look at what Chanina ben Dosa says at the end.
But aren't you influenced through Hasidus? That's why you're saying that this is. No, I'm asking. No,
I think it's the other way around. I think that when you see, and we'll see the way the Besh wants us to read Chanina ben Dosa, you'll see that I think that first of all there's a long tradition of what is a Hasid.
but didn't you say this kind of thing of bat and of matzkon? This really belongs to. It's like an anachronism to tell it. They say it on
There
the
are two.
Mishnah.
First of all, the Mishnah definitely has a Mishnat Hasidim. That's what it says. It says Hasidim
Not
Mishanim
Hasidim, another Hasidim for Chovat Alavot. Doesn't have to be.
I didn't say that.
Yeah.
First of all, I said, I think that when you look at the Perek Hey in Brachot is a remarkable Perek. There's no other Perek like this in the Mishnah. That begins with in Sheshet Sidrei Mishnah, the closest thing that you have is the function of the Yechidim and of the Chasid and of Choni HaMe'agel in Ta'anit. Now, why? Because a shared moment that they both have is a notion that there are certain people for whom their supplication is in some way efficacious. It works.
What put the Mishnah and Yuma for Rabbi Akiva? Yeah?
The Mishnah and Rabbi Akiva is all the way at the end.
Right.
Yeah, that's a Mishnah at the end, but from an ending Mishnah, it's hard to know many times. And we saw the Machloket also. We saw the Machloket there, but the point is that there is a Mishnat Chasidim. There is a clear notion that the Mishnat Chasidim is not what ordinary people daven. It's not expected of the avodah, but it gives a different ambiance to what tefillah is. Like on Kriyat Shema, we don't need this. They don't say this about Kriyat Shema. First of all, Kriyat Shema is Kabbalat Malchut Shamayim. It's something completely different. But you'll soon see that something very interesting happens in the Middle Ages. Now, when you look at Chovot HaLevavot doesn't use the word Chasid. That is a translation of the Arabic, and you have different terms in the Arabic that they use, but
But the language that you use, presenceness and immersing, that's not just a language that we are used to from in Gemara. Such kind of words looks like more from like.
I'm looking just at one sliver of the Mishnah. I'm not saying that's the entire Mishnah.
Mm-hmm.
But the Mishnah definitely understands that the Hasidim are doing something different.
Right.
Now, if you connect, now you have to ask ourselves. We have to ask ourselves, what are they doing that's different? And I think that if you look at first of all the preparation, secondly at the notion of you treat the moment of afilu hamelech shoel bishlomo, etc. as descriptive and not necessarily normative, then, and you connect to it, Chanina ben Dosa, at the end of the Perek, you see that the Mishnah has a notion of a chassid, they know what they're looking for. They have a position. Now, then we have Rabbi Akiva at the end of here. Now, if you ask me what the connection is between the two of them on the level of the Mishnah, is it has to do with Shem Havaya. First of all, you see it at the end of Yuma. It's a Katuv Shama. You don't have to go far, but Mikveh Yisrael Hashem. And certainly the Rambam understood it that way, and this is what's so surprising, that the Rambam at the end of Ilchot Mikvaot, he takes Rabbi Akiva and connects it to what? Connects it to the Tosefta in Rosh Hashanah. Now this is his working. The Mishnah doesn't say that, but you see that the Rambam is interested in developing. This will take us to the next step with the Rambam. Let's not stay at this stage because we want to work a bit on the thing. So we'll leave the Sheilot for after. Please remember your question, okay? It's important for me, but we want to make up for lost time. So. Okay, so then what do we have? What else does the Rambam do? Rambam has an amazing moment at the end of Moreh HaNevuchim. Chelek Gimel Perek Nun Aleph in Moreh HaNevuchim, Mashal Armon HaMelech is one of the really high points of the Rambam's writing. I tend to read it as a very close to Sufi
meditation.
Not meditation, but to Sufi sensibilities. My student and Talmid Chaver Omer Michaelis, who wrote a wonderful sefer on Rabbeinu Bachya, he thinks that it's less so, but a lot has to do with understanding the Rambam's connection to Al-Ghazali and to certain very interesting strands. I don't want to go into this right now, but I want to say that look, one thing is clear: Rabbi Avraham ben Rambam belongs to this kind of tradition, and they're part.
The wife of the Rambam, and the wife is Shver, Shogger, and
they're part of a group that was already active in the generation before the Rambam, a circle of Rabbi Avraham Chassid, who is definitely a Jewish Sufi, and there's a tradition on Rabbi David Maimonides that died in ecstasy and tefillah. So now, I think that there are reasons that this is. I don't think that this is the Rambam, but I do think that his form of negative theology and Chelek Gimel Perek Nun Aleph in Moreh HaNevuchim is a strong direction. Remember, the Chelek Gimel Perek Nun Aleph ends with a powerful description of Mitat Nishika, and that's open to everyone. It's open to. It has to do with a very important moment in that chapter, which I will not pursue right now. But what I do want to say is that when the Rambam wants to ask this, there are two things that happen in this perek, in Chelek Gimel Perek Nun Aleph, and we'll see how the Besh picks up on this. And in Chelek Gimel Perek Nun Aleph, after Mashal Armon HaMelech, the Rambam speaks about who is it that enters into the presence of the king, and his answer is that is a person who knows what there is to know, but he doesn't end there. He goes on to speak about someone else whom he calls a Navi. What's the distinction between the Chacham and the Navi in Chelek Gimel Perek Nun Aleph? It's not in what they know, it's in how they know, in the intensity of the knowledge. And that is a point that the Rambam makes also in Perek Yud of Hilchot Tshuva. Okay, the intensity of the knowledge is what is I would say the following. In my opinion, the enigma of Moreh Nevuchim is that the Rambam argues that you cannot have a proper dveikut. You cannot have a dveikut at all if you don't have knowledge of God. The problem is that the Rambam has a very thin conception of what we can know. It's a negative theology. We actually cannot know almost anything. However, he has a very intensive notion of knowing God. Right? Ladat et Hashem, ken? V'yadata hayom v'ashevota levavecha. When the Torah says ladat et, that's extremely intensive, and that's what he works out in Chelik Gimel Perek Nun Aleph. And this is a disproportion in the book.
What does it mean? Could you explain it? What does it mean more intense? How do you explain it?
I'll give the best reading
okay.
in a moment.
So you call
I'm really giving a
I
Prakim.
understand, but we understand that you can't one sheet cover the whole thing, but we're saying more intensity. You mean to say what you started Sufism? This is what you call Sufism?
The Rambam speaks of the notion of dveikut.
Understand?
And the notion of dveikut is, in some sense, some kind of oneness with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, whatever that might mean for him. That's what he says.
You mean that Ladas means experiencing, not knowing?
I don't know.
it has to
First
be
of all, I'm
knowing.
saying what
Both
I
know,
can't.
same thing.
I can't do his
Both know.
phenomenology for him.
Emphasizing Ladas, I think it means it's
What I'm trying to just do is say how he changes his mode of speaking.
Right, but what he's asking is.
And
you-
let me go.
okay. Okay.
Let me
Okay.
give me a chance. Don't worry.
We'll give you-
I'm happy to speak afterwards to discuss it for hours. But I want to give out the Rashi Prakim. And so he has a very thin notion of what we can know, but he uses the very same verb in Hebrew, ladat, to move it from a mode of ladat, of knowing of, ladat et. This is a distinction that he makes, and he follows the Torah in that. Now, then he says, but how does one, what is the avodah of the masigei amitot? What is the mode of worship of someone who has reached
a high level.
a level of knowledge? And he says here that the key concept he uses is kavanah. And he says you learn that all ritual actions are occasions for enabling us to think intensively about God in our daily life. So now and from there he starts moving to another step, to say that this is not only, when you master that, it's not only in acts of mitzvah, but in every step you take. And the Rambam is the first to really take the notion of b'chol drachecha da'eu and turn it into an ethical principle.
Be present.
Yes, in everything you do. And he already did this in Perek of Shmona Prakim. And this has this is part of a very interesting question: what's the relation between Perek Dalet and Perek in Shmona Prakim? And you see that the Rambam moves with this. The Rambam also has a very powerful notion of passion. Now, he wrote on this, and I won't go into it now. But if you want to, I can speak more about the Platonic elements. I think, as I take them to be in the Rambam's thinking. Now, it's important to realize that the Rambam never calls himself a philosopher. He doesn't think that that's what he's doing. He always places himself relative to the whole range of ulama in Arabic, the whole range of chachamim, whether in the sciences or in the or in fiqh, in law, in halakha, in Torah. This is where he places himself, and so this is one issue. The second issue is that he says, but when given our fundamental materiality, at different times, it's impossible to engage in the world and to be in dvikut at the same time. So he says, and how did the Avot reach the madrega they did? So he says, because even when they were busy earning a living, they always had the purpose of what they're doing, the tachlit, the teleology, in mind. Now, this is a problematic moment, because what happens then is that essentially the Rambam says that although you can include the material things that you do in your life, they could be part of a worthy life. For him, this is the moment. This is the moment that you are not in dvikut. And so, even the best of persons and the highest madriga will be at different moments in their lives, even after they achieve knowledge.
This is not a stira, what you said before, that you could...
They will have a split, not split personality, but split standing in the world.
The Rambam Nagdom also. Moshe Rabbeinu,
even Moshe, everyone. Now, and this is a necessary condition. This is a necessary outcome of the human condition. How I think that one of the biggest chidushim of the best is to give a key for how to overcome that. Now, and this is what I want to speak. After we see this, we can now look at the way the best placed himself. Now, the Baal Shem-Tov. Okay. Now, when I'm saying about the Baal Shem-Tov,
before we go to Baal Shem-Tov, can you tell me one word? When isn't enough contradiction yourself when you said that the Rambam learns that you can be present even in materialistic moments. You learn how to be present in the Pu'ula. So why are you saying that you can't be present when you're doing materialistic stuff?
You can't be fully present.
Can't be fully present.
You can't.
What does it mean? You could be a little bit present.
You can.
Present is present.
What you do is that you can integrate. You can integrate what you do in your daily life into your ethical life, but it will necessarily impair the dvikut at that moment. That's the Rambam's position. That's all that he says. In order to understand it, I have to speak more about his epistemology, his entire conception. I just want to say he says that. And many people have felt, if you understand that, a notion of, let's call it for the sake of the moment, authenticity. When you see, you look at for example, German philosophers like Heidegger. Heidegger doesn't use authenticity. He says Einzigkeit. It's being one with yourself. Now, this being one is, for the Rambam, compromised at different moments, and you're feeling it correctly. Does he give a good account of it? not necessarily. But you know what? This might be part of our human, of our human finitude.
Isn't for the Rambam halacha the source of unity,
Of what?
of oneness? Being,
No.
No?
No. No, it can't be.
Berisk.
How can it be?
Soloveitchik.
Soloveitchik is in Rambam.
How can it be? It's not, even in the Mishnah, but the Mishnah doesn't have a notion of oneness. It doesn't speak that way. But the Rambam certainly has, and certainly the best after him. One of the interesting things is I think that the bigger structure of the best here is, first of all, a lot is taken from the Rambam. That creates part of the structure, but also, of course, from wonderful drashot of the Ari in Likutei Torah. There are a few amazing drashot that he's following. There are many interesting questions. Now, when I say the best, my position is that we don't really know anything about the historical best. Whereas the Rambam wrote endlessly, the best didn't write. Now, and the best the voice of the best that I'll try to recreate in a moment, and this is what I tried to do in the book, was to it was the Toldos on the one hand who gives us the most.
Shamatis.
It's amazing, and what first of all, look, I'm not a Choker Hasidut.
Remember our connection? How it started.
What?
Remember our connection?
Of course. Now you can tell it better than I.
Through this book.
What? The I saw that no one has given an account of how we know what the best. How do we find out what the best said, if we can at all? So first of all, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef in at least 3 Sforim that are published between 1780 and 1783, we have hundreds of shmuot. So what I tried to do is to give a system. First of all, half the book, the second half of the book is an attempt to give thematic organization of all the shmuot that are in Rabbi Yaakov Yosef's work. And according to the way I went about it, Begadol, I located 216 basic shmuot v'simanach ima kolel razili. Okay, and it's absolutely beautiful. And here I feel that I was zoche. I did the job, and this was, I fell in love with these drushim many years ago. I used to go on Shabbos morning, but what really pushed me was when I learned Magid Vrav Yaakov. Magid, I think that's the most profound theology that I have studied in modernity. I don't think anybody is near what there is there, and it's interesting because it seems that there was a basement.
Jung like
what?
That they wrote the book that Jung basically copied his.
That's rich.
Jung is not.
There's a whole book written on it.
Jung is that? This is משהו אחר לגמרי. This is very.
Jung copied.
This is a very, very deep. I think that the basic understanding of how you think about avodah begashmiut is the theory is developed by that the best suggested is developed by the Magid, but the details of how to live this kind of life are detailed in Rabbi Yaakov Yosef's work,
Tzipi Kaufman tried to do that. We have Chol Derech the Eye with
Tzipi Alei Shalom was a real and she did a lot of work, but she and of course without the work of many people before me, I would have never been able to do this. And unfortunately, she passed away at a very young age. I knew her well. Her Abba published a new translation of Chovot HaLevavot, and this is Chaval al De'avdin. So let's begin. I call the book Lifnei Yot HaChassidut, Before Hasidism, because I asked myself, Baal Shem-Tov and his students didn't know they were Chassidim. This
Obviously.
Yeah, this is something that happens afterwards. So, but both the research and from Shalom on. Look at Shalom's wonderful chapter in major trends on Chassidut is already places them as Chassidim. Now, I have a different take on this whole thing, and but I'd like us to take a look at first of all, begin with a wonderful his description of Hanina ben Dosa. Okay, which is okay. We have, for example. I'm looking for the one here. Hold on a second. There are a couple. There's first of all Chanoch, and there is I'll find it on the here. Okay.
Page.
We can start from look on page 38, right? Page 38. You see my page 38?
I think we didn't make up the 38.
36 to 7.
Yeah? Oh, yeah.
38 on the right? What does he say? He says, okay. דשמעתי בשם מורי, פירוש הפסוק, right? פירוש הפסוק, כל אשר תמצא ידך לעשות בכוחך עשה, כי אין בשאול דעת וחשבון. כעניין חנוך מטטרון שהיה מייחד קדוש ברוך הוא, קודש בריך הוא על כל תפירה וכולו, הוא כך. אחד, והמחשבה נקרא אין סוף הוויה, והמעשה הוא אדנות, וכאשר מחבר המעשה עם המחשבה בעת עשיית המעשה, נקרא ייחוד קודש בריך הוא. וזה שאמר, כל אשר תמצא ידך לעשות בכוחך עשה, רצונו לומר, כי המחשבה נקרא חוכמה, כוח מה. That is a potential. ותעשה המעשה בכוחך, שהיא המחשבה לחבר שניהם, שהוא ייחוד קודש בריך הוא ושכינתי. כי אין בשאול וגומר. ותיבת אין משמשת למעלה ולמטה. רצון לומר שאם אינך מאמין בזה, ותשאול ותסתפק בזה, אז אין בשאול דעת וחשבון. Okay, this is a nice play on words, and וצריך הבנה, but I'll try to push it into this thing. Now, this concept of Chanoch is actually the model of yeah. So first of all, the Tofel Tfirot is Avodah Begashmiut is not a term that the Best uses. This is a later term, but that every single action that a human being does can be actually turned into what a ritual does. That is to be a moment that you, in time and space, create a presence of God. Now, how does this work? This is an interesting question. How does this work? Chanoch is the model, right, with the Tofel Tfirot, but Kol Ha'olam Nizon Bishvil Chanina B'ni. So you have a whole set of drashot al Chanina B'ni who does a very similar thing. Bishvil, the best reads it, the Bashvil. Okay? Now, remember what I said the last time about the importance of the concept of the tariq in the Rambam, in Arabic, in the Rambam's thinking, the path. There is a path, and you have to go along. What the Oved does and what the Hasid does is that they walk on a certain path. And that path is not only it has something powerfully redemptive in it, and it's powerfully salvific in it, and the image of Chanoch and the image of Chanina are seen as being on one continuum. But how do they do it? What is it about? And first of all, I want to relate this to the
אבל הוא אומר איך לעשות את זה. השם מחבר, המעשה עם המחשבה.
אבל איך עושים את זה? ולמה זה עובד?
And you immerse yourself.
לא. אז יש,
There's no difference between מחשבה, totally present.
Hold on. I think you're going in the right direction, but in order to create that, what you have to do is something else. You have to, and this is where language comes in. Let me show you how I put it. I think the best way I put it is in page 37 on note 77. Okay, I'll read it with you in Hebrew, and this is and I'll translate it, and you'll see how he works, how the best works with the tradition before him. So first of all, let's explain what we're doing. Kavanah, right? Kavanah, he ifnun todah. It's a modification of consciousness. Yichud hu pe'ula toda'atit or oralit. Right? That's an activity of consciousness, or it could be also an oral one. Shel chibur yachad shel otiyot v'shemot al pi tziruf mesuyam hamevi lishnayim. Right? You take, now look at this word, this use of the word yichud. This is actually not Hebrew at all. In Hebrew, we would say le'ached. Right? That's interesting. Le'ached in Hebrew means to put something aside. It doesn't mean to turn into one.
Individualized.
What happened here? What happened here is, if you look at what does the Rambam call the mitzvah that's included in the pasuk Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad?
Yichud Hashem.
What?
Yichud Hashem.
Yichud. That is the translation of the Arabic cognate tawhid. That's the moment the word yichud comes into Hebrew in a new sense. And this is picked up by the entire tradition after the Rambam. Everybody thinks that way. Right? So liyached becomes the high moment. You'll never find that verb beforehand in Chazal, or that's not the way they speak. But it's crucial for after the space of Kavanah is created, then, and that creates a certain mental and self-consciousness of an Oved, then you can start asking questions of how do you go about properly having a Kavanah if you're a person for whom the relation between action and the intensity of your thinking has changed. This is the move the Rambam made, and everyone goes after him. And they're very unsatisfied with the Rambam's creating a split personality. How do you overcome that? I think that the first time you see a very profound overcoming it is here, in the Baal Shem-Tov. Why did he do that? What happened? That has an immense background, and I can speak about it, but it's important to notice that I think that this is what he bequeathed. What did he do? He explained, first of all, that on the ethical level, what you do is bechol drachecha da'ehu. And that's why Chanina is so important. Chanina is the shvil, right? The shvil, that shvil enables us to walk our paths through Da'at. Okay? Da'at has a completely different meaning for the Rambam than it for the Besh than it has for the Rambam. Da'at, in a certain tradition in the Kabbalah, especially that of Ramak, is the Da'at is not a sfira like Chochmah and Bina. The Da'at is actually the dynamic aspect of the Atzilut. And what a Mikubal does in this, what a Miyached does in this tradition, is that he moves along the concept of Da'at. And that's why Da'ehu, that wonderful drash of connecting the Hey and Vav, has to do exactly with this kind of consciousness. Okay, it's very different from the Rambam. B'chol drechecha da'ehu, la'asot min ha'chomer tzura, to find a way of unpacking the materiality of any moment or anything by what? By understanding what gives it its tzura, its form, its identity, right? Form is a technical term.
What does it mean? The netzot hakadosh, what does it mean? Okay.
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 There are different ways of understanding.
Okay.
I first want to speak
Right.
about what their toolbox is,
Right.
and that's a metaphysical concept. You don't have to be a mikubal to do that, right? You don't have to be a miyached of that. That the lasot min hachomer tzura is a very interesting term. Actually, in Aristotelian metaphysics, it makes no sense, but it is a very important concept in Neoplatonic thinking. I won't go into that right now. So these are two issues. There's A, b'chol drachecha da'ehu. There is לעשות מהחומר צורה, ואיך עושים את זה, and this tradition זה לייחד קודשא בריך הוא ושכינתה. What does this mean? These are the three elements. But how did they activate it? How did they understand in this Beit Midrash that they were creating a moment of actually changing the world? And I want to argue this is not magic. They're not thinking magic. They have a very fascinating way of thinking about the world. Now look at what I'll continue to read here because this is important. Here I simply explain the technique. What does the yichud do? One, ליחוד, לזיווג של היבטים שונים של האצילות. There are different aspects to the emanation of divinity, of life, of being into the world, על פי רוב של זכר ונקבה. ובכך להעצמה של ישות באמצעות שפיעה. We intensify our being. Being is not one-dimensional. We intensify it by a constant overflow. Now, shfi'ah, this metaphor for an overabundance of being is also the Rambam. The Rambam introduces this in Chelek Bet, Perek Yud Bet, of Moreh Nevuchim, right? When he tries to explain what happens, or is it in Chelek Gimel?
Navi.
Jumped up now. No, he's trying to understand what happens when we see that there are interactions between people or between beings that are not necessarily material ones. And we can't give them a location. But we see that there is a causal relation between them. He says that I will use the metaphor of shfi'ah for that, for shefa. This is it's chelik bet per yud bet,
yeah,
right?
chelik bet.
If I remember correctly. Now, okay, so look, shvi'ah, tawhid, kavanah connected to mot nishika. This is all these elements are in the Rambam, but he's using it, but we'll see that the Besh uses it slightly differently, because for different reasons. Al ken gam hamilim.
What does it mean? What does it mean? Shvi'ah?
Give it a chance. You want to understand? You understand
Yeah.
changing the world? Would you ask him right away? What does it mean? What does quantum physics mean?
But I wouldn't have a shir a few minutes on quantum physics.
Exactly. Now, what do you think? Do you think that understanding in Yichud is any different?
No.
אוקיי, אז ייחוד הוא איפה סוג מסוים של כוונה. על כן גם, therefore too, המילים כוונות וייחודים עשויות להיות נרדפות. They're interchangeable, even though they have completely different meanings. אם כי הראשונה משמשת בעיקר לייחודים שמשמשים את כוונת הריטואלים ההלכתיים. When we usually speak about כוונות, that's what we mean. ואילו האחרת, ייחודים, משמשת בעיקר לפעולות לא ריטואליות, like עבודה בגשמיות. Okay? How you eat, how you walk in the world, how you meet another person. All this is an occasion for Avodat Hashem if you want to pick up if you want to pick up the gauntlet. And this is what Chanoch does. This is what Chanina ben Dosa does. הייחוד כאן מתאפשר, okay, now how does the ייחוד work? What are they doing? על ידי פירוק מרקם אונתולוגי קודם ועיצובו מחדש. You take apart what this מייחד does. He looks at...
Look at the shoe. Let's talk about the shoe. Let's talk about the shoe.
But the shoe about
He wants to use the Coca-Cola.
no, this is a great Chanoch is doing. Let's say you are tying your shoelace. You're tying your shoelace, and you could say, okay, I'm going out for a run, I'm tying my shoelace. But you can say, every time I tie a shoelace, I'm tying together the world in my own self-understanding. Now, a shoelace is a shoelace, but in the hand of Chanoch, this has become a completely different moment. And they're very serious about this. What they're doing is they're constantly busy taking apart the world as we know it and rethinking it. This, I think it's only possible if you have a much more linguistic understanding of reality than a strong material notion. The notion of causality here is not the kind of notion of causality, for example, you'll find at someone like you. But it's already much more understandable. The more we go towards nuclear physics and afterwards, then we see that the way we arrange things in the world is primarily issues of identity, of our ability to live in a life. It has very little to do with our understanding of what a physicist would call real causality. They've undone it. And now it needs, if you ask me who among modern Jewish philosophers is closest to this conception, it's Hermann Cohen. Hermann Cohen, I think,
JB's teacher.
Hermann Cohen was a genius. he was really a genius, and I think that this is an amazing thing. How did Cohen think about reality? Cohen said, Shem Havaya signifies being.
Is.
But the world
Yeah.
is anything that is not God is always becoming. And therefore it has no stability. We're always in motion. Everything is in motion. How did he do this? In order to do this, he is already working with analytic geometry. So instead of thinking about axiomas that have very, very strong notions of causality, he's thinking about asymptotic curves that are always moving towards infinity and never reach a point. That is the way he thinks of becoming.
Why do you call it theological?
What?
Why do you call it theological?
Okay. Why?
It's not
Because
so
it's a,
theological.
no. What's the difference between ontology and metaphysics? The way I'm using it, these words. Every metaphysics has an ontology. Metaphysics is a very strong statement about being. But not every ontology is metaphysically committed. There are many things we don't know. There are many thinkers that don't think that they can make a strong commitment, but they have a picture of reality. They're not arguing
Pseudoscience?
that it's metaphysical.
Pseudoscience?
What?
Made up science?
It's not made up.
Pseudoscience?
This is where we are. This is where we live.
Okay.
This is where we live, and we're not making too strong a statement. That's why I think the notion of ontology is very important, Noam. And this is exactly what they're doing. It's not a
You
claim.
say ontology is what happens in front of you, and metaphysics is behind the scenes.
Pardon me.
It's the explanation of what it
I'm-
is.
Behind the scenes, that
But what I'm saying is that it's important to understand that a miyached like the Besht does not think that what he's doing is only in his mind. He is looking differently at reality. He's making a claim on reality, but on a certain level of it. If you ask me, if you want to ask me, for example, how I would think about it, what is his notion of where does this happen? I think this is understanding of the lowest tefillah, of what Shekhinah is. It's always in motion. It is, but it's always in motion. That's why Yichud is so important for him, because you constantly have to infuse the world with meaning. And how do you do that? By presence. Now, it's a very Heideggerian reading in its spirit. It's very close to Hermann Cohen, but this is modern
Explain what you said.
metaphysics.
How do you do it with presence? Could you explain what you said?
What?
Could you explain what you said? How did you do that with presence? Could you explain?
With presence?
Yeah.
The way I use the term presence is to explain that you can affect a different way of being in the world only if you're completely immersed there.
Tell me by the muscle of the shoe tying.
Again.
What do you mean presence in the shoe tying?
That you'll have to ask him. I'm not going to explain everything. What I'm going to do is sketch a different picture.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is a picture that makes a lot of sense, because when you're walking. I have to come to give the shiur. There's a marathon, and for an hour I'm looking for a taxi to bring me here. Now, one thing I can say is I can give up. We're stuck. I know this is what I said. Nothing I can say is, wait a second, why am I stuck here? Where am I? What's happening? Why is this the mania? Why am I being held up here? And at least one moment I can tell you is that a taxi stopped, and I went to the door and said, I need a taxi. He said, and he got out of it, the taxi driver got out, and a very elderly person got out of the taxi. He said, I'm sorry, but someone else has ordered me. And I saw this elderly person, and I knew this was my mitzvah. And I took him to where he needed. I walked him he was going to eat. and I said, okay, this is, for me, giving a shiur is where I live. You go out of your comfort zone, you get new things that happen.
What does that do with presence?
Presence
In the moment.
is to be able to see. To be able to see. The best is completely seeing every moment he sees. For me, this is the heart of the matter. It's very, I know in later on, for example, let me give you a later appropriation of this in Hasidus, you can see in Gur. Why was the point of the pintel, of the nikuda, so important for the Sfas Emes? This I realized, so first of all, what he did is in a world where seemingly no Kedusha, let's learn how to intensify at least the point of Kedusha within us that'll guide us in our daily work, because we can't do this anymore. This idea that we can see Hashem in our daily lives is impossible for us now.
Why is that?
I don't know. Because the world is different. Because this was before Poland was broken up. It's before the French Revolution. He's writing afterwards. And you see this clearly in people like Rabbi Nachman.
Reb Nachman is before.
But what does this Sfas Emes do? Listen, he did something else. He said that if the Chassidim will intensify this moment, with my blik, I will be able to activate it. And anyone who was zochet to see the Rebbe in Rabbi Yisrael, in
Nice.
the Beis Yisrael, his eyes, you saw how he did it. And this is the mode.
That's unexpected.
This is a mode. This is not magic. This is a tradition.
I was with you.
This
too.
what?
I was with
This is something we totally didn't expect.
No, I'm not I'm giving you a moment of how this is appropriated in different kinds of.
But that was for him, but what about other people?
Other people's other things.
The Sfas Emes is a
I'm giving. This is a model that was used. This is used. One way of doing it is you take the world apart. Another is you try to concentrate everything in you and in a community in which there is what makes the Hasidic community what it is that it had a axis. The axis is the tzaddik. And the tzaddik in Gur, what he did was to activate. And he activated a very certain point in people. Activating is not magic. It's when you look at someone and you know what they've done and you touch it. And you know how to do that. And it's...
Tell me then what is
No, but I'm saying that's... Can you wake up? You know what? I'll give you another.
If this is not magic, tell me what is magic.
You know what? This is not magic. These are techniques. This
No,
is something
I'm saying,
completely
yeah,
else.
well,
That's,
magic
what
is
does that
technique too,
have to
but-
do with us? So you're
I
saying
wanted to give you. I wanted to give them a modern model. I wanted to give them a model afterwards. See, I don't think that this is the best. I don't think that this is the best. But I think that this is one of the traditions that came out of it. I wanted to give it. Why did I give the question? How you're different in the world? Look at Rabbi Yaakov Yosef has a wonderful story. Actually, I asked him. I asked Zelik to do it because I felt that it really has.
What do you say to what's his name?
To who?
Shlomo Maimon's word from the Maggid. V'hoyu kenagan amanagan. When you turn into the
Look, I can't answer for everybody, but what I can do is okay. Look at page 34. Look at this wonderful description on. This is in the Yiddish translation, which is a later translation of right up top. You see,
Shivchei Bashem.
yeah, of Shivchei Abesh. This is the meaning in the Yiddish translation of the story that we have in Hebrew, but it sounded to me that this captures that this must have been something like the original because because it's clear that the stories were there. Look, this is Rabbi Yaakov Yosef. Okay, you read it in Yiddish. It's better than me.
No, we'll do it in
Und das ist mir schon gewesen. Hat hat bisher nicht gehalten heint. עד עכשיו הוא לא החזיק מהבשט.
מדברים פה בתור בסיום כביוסי.
כן, ist מן reingekommen vorn zum Best. פתאום, he felt, I want to go. Now, this is a wonderful description because anyone who's done psychoanalysis knows this. That these are the moments that suddenly you have an urge. And he doesn't understand. He's suddenly being pulled. He thought that this ja, los ich sehen, was tut diese Sache ihm. Ja, bוא נראה מה הוא עושה איתו. Now what happens? Now the same thing, you see right afterwards, the same story we have with Rahu and the Ari. Right? Now, what is it? What is it about being a student? What is it about being a teacher and recognizing a potential disciple? How do we go about? What is it that how do we awaken him? Now, in the continuation of the story, what happens is, of course, that the Rabbi Yaakov Yosef comes on Friday morning to the Besht because he decided to go there for Shabbos, and he's already and he's come late. He wants to daven, and he bumps into the Besht, and the Besht is smoking his pipe, smoking his lulki. Yeah, we'd all like to know what he had in his lulki. But he says, I'm running. I'm running to daven, and this is what I come for. I don't have time to go back for Shabbos. Look at this guy smoking his pipe. And the Besht looks at him, and he goes in, and then Rabbi Yaakov says something amazing. In the middle of davening, I started crying. ובכיתי בכייה גדולה, וידעתי שלא ממני היא.
ידעתי
שלא ממני היא. I don't know what it's suddenly, do I bring it afterwards? I don't remember. בשעת התפילה בכה בכייה גדולה, שלא בכיתי מימיי, והבנתי שלא משלי הייתה זאת הבכייה. I finally cried. Now, this is a great moment. It's a great moment. I was in Vienna a few weeks, last week, and I had a chance to go to Freud's house and to go to the thing because it's I feel like many people have a great obligation to. I'm a Baal Chod for the tremendous work he did, and I don't know how many of you have treated people with serious trauma, and this is something that I know unfortunately a lot about, and I've done a lot of work.
This is a pseudic job.
Right.
He's a psychiatrist.
Psychologist.
And I'm telling you, I didn't go upstairs. I sat in the cafe just to have a cup of coffee.
Downstairs.
We were there in the cafe.
And I started crying. וידעתי שלא ממני הבכייה הזאת. It's not. No, this is about being able to listen to yourself. This is presence. Presence doesn't necessarily mean, and there's also a lot of negative presence. Hate is a very important and very problematic negative way of being with another person. You don't only love people, hating them is fundamental. And I think what the Besht did, part of opening the Shvil, is understanding that if you want to be an Oved B'Gashmiyut, you have to walk in the world in a way in which you know how to open yourself to the world. That way you also open the world differently. So there's not one answer to how you do it. What you do is that you get certain structures and certain hadrachot to understand how to move in the world. Now, there are many ways of it. You mentioned Jung before, but I think Jung is important in another sense.
I think there's a whole book that explains how Jung said that the Maggid of Mezritch already saw his whole psychology beforehand.
Jung's psychology has very little to do with the Maggid. I've read, I think, everything that Jung has read. But I think that there is, as written, but I think that there's a movement, a crucial movement between being a younger person who can create a rooted ego to someone who's and hence caught especially in the archetype of a Ouroboros, of the snake that's biting its own tail, to move into an expansion of your capacity to live an open life that you can do only as a mature person. Now that I think that the only discipline that I know in the past 100 years that has taken on to treat human violence without violence is psychoanalysis. That for me is the chazon of
It's a kind of
that's
yichud.
the vision. What?
It's a kind of yichud between the id and the ego.
Between the
Id and the ego.
if you want to speak in the language of Freud,
Yeah.
I think it's I can explain why I think it's problematic. I think Melanie Klein understands well why it's problematic. But there are other ways to go.
Can you
For
say
example, you can go to Wilfred Bion. I think he's crucial. There are ways to do it. But it needs.
So there's a kind of reverie that you're talking about. Is that like the
What I'm saying is, first of all,
reverie is the Bionian term for presence.
Yes. But it depends also where you are in your own development. I have my own critiques of
Yeah,
this.
but it's also a kind of daydreaming. It's a kind of
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, no. Everything is a chance if you take it. Everything is there, and in that way, or as for example, look what the Ari says in on page 35. אין לך כל תפילה ותפילה on top שלא יתחדשו אז אורות חדשים גמורים, לא ראי זה כראי זה. Every moment is different. The world is a world of becoming. Accepting becoming is very, very difficult, especially if you grow up halachically. Because halacha is about structure. Halacha is about structure. It makes it very difficult to open ourselves to the flow of being. And on the other hand, opening yourself has terrible prices with it at the same time. And this is what I take the heart of it to be about. Now, but I want to, let's keep on reading a little bit more in that note of 77, because that's where I spoke about the technique. I said הייחוד כאן מתאפשר על ידי פירוק מרקם אונתולוגי קודם ועיצובו מחדש. We tried to take a certain understanding of what the world was up to now, what reality is, and we try to take it apart. וכך מאפיין אהוד בן אור, I mentioned his book, Worship of the Heart, in the previous meeting, את ההקשר הלשוני המשמש בסיס לפרקסיס הזה. I used to have it in English, yeah. the editor of the book made me
Put everything in
wanted me
Hebrew.
to take all the English, everything that was in English, and to translate it into Hebrew. Okay.
How would you say it? How would you say it in English?
Okay, he said, the attempt to constantly undermine the way our regular language forms our consciousness, and this is part of what we spoke about last time, can cause a serious fracturing of normal consciousness. Okay? And this is a nice description of sometimes what happens in the very descriptions of the Avodah Yehudim is very close to psychotic moments, because it takes people apart. If you don't have a proper guide, you don't have a proper teacher, someone to take you, if you don't do a lot of work. For example, I don't know how many of you have done yoga, but I do yoga now for many years. And I know, for example, past 2 years, worked only on one thing, to learn how to breathe again. I had heart surgery, changed completely the way I am, and I had to learn how to breathe again if I wanted to do the kind of work I do, the kind of avodah I do, and this needs a lot of.
Presence process.
Do you think
You
psychedelics
need a
helps
teacher.
with this?
I don't like to use psychedelic materials
That's exactly what it's about. It's about
because
breathing.
I want. I'll tell you why. And here I think is the shortcoming of psychoanalysis. I think that the major function of psychotherapy, in my understanding, is first of all to make someone who is dysfunctional be able to function in the world, which means to have a job, to have a family, and to hold them. That's not a small thing.
Love and work.
But a psychoanalysis can't and shouldn't be an ethical guide for a person. And after many years that I thought that I would shift towards doing proper work in therapy, I decided that no, that actually the fact that I did a lot of work in ethics and a lot of work in Hasidut and other fields has made me possible to think about what I think is a great lacuna in our lives, and that is to teach people, after you gain the kind of functionality that therapy can give you if you need it, how do you go about creating an ethical personality? Now, I'm saying dafka the word ethics, because the word ethics in Greek means creating a character. That is a fullness of a character. How do you do that? That needs much more reflection. It means thinking about what the virtues you want to develop are. What's the difference between your practical virtues and your meditative ones? What is avoda? You must think avoda again. And this is an amazing source for doing
I was
this.
asking about psychedelics, not psychoanalysis.
No, I think that's why I don't want to do psychedelics.
You're not
Because-
doing- you're not doing
Opens up your
anything.
mind.
No, but you don't
You're not
become
doing-
your
you're just taking a
mind
pill and you're just
creating
not
a
doing
character.
anything.
Well, you can always back it up with creating a character, but at least it brings you inwards and it kind of like explores the,
Yes.
So we're also saying that psychoanalysis doesn't
I think
ethics either.
I think it's a completely different kind of avodah. A completely different kind of avodah. And I can speak
Positive
mostly for myself.
psychology tries to do that, and also existentialism was trying to
There are many.
Yeah.
I think existentialism doesn't have the tools to do it, and I don't think that practicing psychologists should do it. I think it's different. I think ethical education is a different practice. It's a completely different practice. And it's a question of opening up the possibilities that are yours and assuming them from a place of responsibility. That's getting a high doesn't in itself have any ethical or religious value.
Psychedelics are not about getting a high. I mean,
No, that's all I'm. If it's within a program that you're doing, that's something else. But I can tell you,
People use psychedelics in order
As a
they
tool.
have
It's
a
a tool
trauma
to open them up
to
you see,
be able
I know,
to develop the
I
character.
can tell you one thing. You can speak about this conceptions, and people that have done psychedelics have a much deeper understanding of what you're talking about than people that have not.
first of all, I agree with you completely, but I can tell you, let me give you another example, okay? When I had to do heart surgery, I bumped into a friend of mine who's actually an analyst. And I told her, I hadn't seen her for a long time. I said to her, I have to go to surgery in a little while. And she said to me, you should speak to so-and-so, he's a Hartman. He was her supervisor. So I picked up a book of his. And first of all, I read it because I wanted to know who it is I'm going to meet. This was probably the best book I had read in Hebrew of a description of shell shock. There's someone who fought in Yom Kippur, and it was a it was a smart and a profound description, because what he tried to do was to hand over the material so you can reflect on it. He was doing very clever work with it. And after I saw what he did, I wrote him a little note, and he said, "Come visit." I said to him, and he was my guide through the heart surgery. And he said to me a couple of things. He said to me, "Listen, when I had a heart attack, a second heart attack, some years ago," and he said to me, "My teacher, I was in intensive care in Shaare Tzedek. They brought me in, and my teacher heard that I had a heart attack, and he called me on the phone, and the surgeon answered the phone, and he said to him, 'Listen, I'm his teacher. Please just put this next to his ear.' And he spoke to him, and he said that his vitals started changing, and he led him through the first phases of the tikkun that he needed. And then he asked me a question: do you want your heart? Do you want your life? If you think seriously about this, and you understand that you're standing now exactly at that point which the Torah describes beautifully. And he says, "Re'eh natati lefanecha hayom et hachayim v'et hatov v'et hamavet v'et hara uvacharta b'chayim leman tichyat havezarecha." You have to make a decision that this is the life you want, that this is the heart you want. And I thought about it, and I thought about, what does it mean? What does it mean to be present? For me, now at this moment. And he said to me, the guide, my teacher, he said to me the following. He said, if you think about this seriously, and you will be there, I will tell you two things. First of all, the heart that the surgeon will find will be different. Second, the pain will be less, and therefore the amount of of the different of the
Scarring?
sedative that they'll need will be less.
Anesthesia.
And I can tell you, b'didi hava uvda. It was within 3 days, I was out of the hospital. When I was wheeled out of the Chadar Nituch, I was still connected to all the things. I was thinking to myself, I was completely aware. And I thought that I wasn't awake, but I was aware. And I started this pilpul with myself. I asked myself, אבל איך זה עובד? And I said, that's a question of a dualist. But you're not a dualist. I wrote a book critiquing dualism of mind and body. Every human soul has a human body, and human bodies are ensouled. This is the wrong question. I said, okay.
Who wrote a book? Who said that? You said.
I wrote a book on this. No, I have a position on this. No, I'm a real philosopher.
Against child
What was the name of that book?
What was the name of the first book?
This is a critique of dualism.
No, the book that you said about the professor that went through shell shock. And
Yes.
he wrote. What's his name?
I'll remember his name in a moment. It's a moving book. It's a very powerful one, and interestingly, he tried in the first. We met 3 or 4 times, and he gave me the hadracha that I needed. And a crucial text for me is the beautiful text in the last shar of Chovot HaLevavot, where he says that the ahava is about לרוקן את הלב מהעולם כדי שהקדוש ברוך הוא ייכנס אליו. And I thought a lot about this text. I thought about what is the heart that I want. And I'm telling you, I had major heart surgery. In 3 days I was out. I was out. I didn't feel. I was awake most of the time. My wife was sitting outside, and she said at a certain point she got up and said, I wonder what's doing with them. Suddenly the surgeon comes out and said, we finished. He didn't even have to have the kind of hitalvut. I didn't have to take pills. I don't have to take. It's now. I'm not saying this can only be done with serious ethical work. That is, you ask yourself, what does it mean to be a person in this world? להיות מכוון צריך להיות אדם מכוון. This is what the Besh taught his students. And now, of course, it involves saying no to a whole bunch of things. There's no magic. It's not about magic. It's not about mysticism. I think that these are terms that take us off the off.
That's exactly the definition.
What do you mean it's not about mysticism? What do you mean it's not about mysticism?
So what is it?
It's your life, a true life story. It's not a
Mysticism and magic are mystifying concepts. They throw us off because what they're saying is saying that thinking about how we work with our self-consciousness to build an ethical personality is not something you can give an account of. Now, that's why they're not helpful concepts. And what I've tried to do is to speak completely about a fine-tuned toolbox. And I think the Rambam has this. I think the Besht has it. Now, it's okay. People can mystify things. There are many ways of doing it. I think that what we're called for. Now I'll explain why I don't like. I'll say 2 stories. One which I think was a crazy experience, but also within the realm of the sand. I'm sorry we went off on this track, but this is the Besht's world already. This is not the Rambam's world, but it is the Besht's world.
Now we're in Menachem Lorberbaum's world.
world.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is my world
Through the
also.
lens of
No, but I'm not.
understand.
Yes, but I'm not.
Started from the Rambam.
No, listen. All I can do. You ask me what is it? What is
Exactly,
it? I
yeah.
can't speak for Hanoch. I can't speak for the Rambam,
Yeah.
but I can speak for how I've tried to appropriate and why this is important
Amazing.
for me.
No, I think it's
Amazing.
wonderful.
Because I am a person that works in.
No, it's very hard. I mean, to see academics that internalize this kind of work, because you can do this work and just be completely
And
disconnected.
can be
from
can
it,
be
you know?
you know,
It can be like Gershon Shalom, like leaves that had no connection with that.
Sholem,
I wouldn't say you did- I wouldn't say you-
Sholem was deeply
Yes.
involved
He
in
was.
what
I wouldn't say that Yudalibus is not connected.
Yudalibus much more than Sholem. Much
Yeah.
more than Sholem.
The books, they don't look that way.
How do you know that?
My great teacher Moshe Idel, I'm not. I told Moshe once that I was when he got the Israel Prize. I said to Moshe, I was zoche that you were not my teacher. I never went to a class of his in the university because I studied philosophy. I knew of him and I knew him well, but I never went to a class. But because of that, I became your friend, even though I was younger, 10 years younger. But to be a chaver of someone that late Razda Nisle. I mean, there's nothing like Moshe Idel. And Moshe Idel says, I'm nothing like Shlomo Pinas, my teacher, who knew every language in the world. And this is an amazing experience. Now, I'll say two things. First thing is that when my God tried to do at the beginning a kind of hypnagogic hadracha, it's like Shema Vayam was like a armor around me. It threw everything that he tried to do out. And I said, no, you can't work this way. This, my inwardness is stopping this, whatever it means. I can't do this way. So, and then he said to me, okay. Then he asked me the real questions. He said, do you want this life? And that was a question that I had to answer. And you know what? Look, there are people who, I think one of the...
Can you explain a little bit more? Just not code names. What do you mean you want this life? Can you explain a bit more?
Yeah, do you want to live? Do you want to live? You're going into surgery tomorrow.
Okay.
There are people who don't want to live.